This is Joanne Van Tassel, and welcome to this edition of Information in the Public Interest. Today, my guests are Dennis Kolar, Managing Director of the Road Commission for Oakland County, and Craig Bryson, who is the Public Information Officer. And we're going to explore with them some various issues involving roads here in Oakland County. So Dennis, let's start with you. As Director of the Road Commission for Oakland County, what is your basic responsibility?
Well, our charges have been given to us by the legislature in 1913 was to provide reasonably safe and convenient roads. And that is our charge since 1978. Safety's been our #1 priority throughout the system. But we're responsible for the maintenance of 2,700 miles of roads, and we also have 230 miles of state highways that we maintain for MDOT.
Okay, do you take care of all of the roads in the county, or are there some that other jurisdictions have responsibility for?
As I said, 2,700 miles are road commissions and essentially everything in townships, minus private roads. And then in cities and villages, we have some of the mile roads, but none of the city or the city streets in the subdivisions.
Okay. And your source of funding, doesn't it come from what we generically label as gas and weight taxes? In other words, the fuel tax you pay when you buy a gallon of gas and the fees you pay every year through the Secretary of State to license your vehicle?
That is our primary operating revenue, is the gas tax, the 19 cents per gallon that's currently on gas, and plus registration fees. However, there is another source of funding that we rely on for our major projects, and that's the Federal Highway Administration. And to Oakland County, there's about $16 or $17 million that comes to the county every year, but we also have to share that with the cities and villages.
So, you mentioned you take care of some of the state trunk lines. So I'm assuming that's like I-75, M24, roads of that type.
That's correct. Any M road, US road, and I road, if you will, that is in the county, pretty much we take care of them. And we have a contract where the state pays us to do that.
And the state says this is how much I'm going to pay you, and you have to do the work?
Well, it's county, or through the state, the County Road Association. We've negotiated agreement with the Michigan Department of Transportation, and we are essentially paid for time and materials.
Okay, time and materials, but not for wear and tear on your trucks.
Well, there is a rental rate that we get paid for, so there is an equipment rental rate that covers some of that, not all of it.
And speaking of equipment, I can remember this past winter when people were concerned about, we're going to have a major snowstorm and the street's going to get cleared, and there was talk, we only got so many vehicles and so many men. What is the current state of your maintenance fleet there at the Road Commission?
Well, certainly we would like it to be in better shape. Right, currently we have approximately 135 dump trucks that outfit for winter maintenance. When we're at what we call full run, if a major storm's coming in, we need 106 of those trucks to be up and running. And quite frankly, sometimes that's a challenge to do. Now, we've been able to meet it, and our fleet's getting older, but currently we're able to do it. And I just, since you bring up winter maintenance, I just wanted to share a fact that I don't think a lot of people understand how much winter maintenance costs. And for us, when we're out with 106 trucks and the staff that we need to support that, it's about $25,000 an hour.
Wow.
So not that we try to err on the side of safety, but it's important to make the right call when we're relying on weather information from a number of sources, because it's expensive if you don't get the call right.
And you talk about these positions that you've had, and yet I know in looking through your budget and through the 3-year plan that you do on an annual basis, constantly updating it, that since the year 2008, 2009, that you are down here about 415. No, that's how many you have. You're down 135 positions.
Well, the latest count is we're actually down 189 positions, which is a 34% drop since 2007, and the lowest number of employees we've had since any time since the 1950s, actually.
So do more, because we've got more roads, because we've had more subdivisions built, more businesses, things like that, but do it with fewer people and with fewer equipment.
The last time we were operating with this number of employees, the county had half the population it has and 1/5 the amount of traffic it has.
Yeah. And I don't think people fully understand. Well, I paid my property taxes. How come you're not taking care of my road? And they need to realize it's strictly gas and weight tax coming through the state, and there's a formula that the state takes a certain amount off the top, a certain percentage goes to the Secretary of State to issue licenses. To me, it would be better if they just, allocated or charged a $1 processing fee for every transaction through the Secretary of State's office, rather than taking money away from the roads. That at least would give you a little bit more money.
Certainly. It's about, I believe, about $20 million that comes off the top that goes to the Secretary of State's office.
That's a lot of money. And if memory serves me right, the last time we had an increase in the gas tax was when John Engler was governor, back in the mid to late 80s.
1997.
97, okay. So we're still talking
15
years. That's a long time to go without, an increase in revenue.
Well, and not only that, but the revenue generated by the gas tax has been going down for a number of reasons. Cars have become more fuel efficient, so we're all using less gas. Yeah. That's going to increase as federal fuel efficiency standards increase, and become more onerous on us.
Yes.
As well as the economy was tough. Fewer people working, fewer people were driving. They were driving less miles. That's less revenue for the gas tax. So those things have combined to kind of create a road funding tsunami in Michigan.
As long as all of us were driving gas-powered vehicles, the gas tax was fairly equitable across the board for all drivers. But as we have had the federal government come in with changing the standards, you've had the major car companies developing hybrids, which use less fuel. You've had them develop the all-electric cars. You've had same thing, whether they're domestic automakers or Japanese or German automakers, the same thing. So my neighbor, who drives this more fuel-efficient car and gets 30 miles to the gallon, is paying less gas tax than I am, because mine averages 20 miles to the gallon, and yet the guy down the street with the electric car isn't paying any.
That's right.
But we're all using the same roads and putting the same wear and tear. How do we address that inequity?
Well, that's a great question. That's something the state is struggling with. I think ultimately, someday down the road, there will be some sort of a tax on the miles you drive rather than on the amount of fuel you use. I think we're a ways away from that, and we have to come up with some interim solution, maybe a increase in the vehicle registration fee for electric vehicles or something like that. But that's a difficult challenge for the legislature. None of those options is easy or popular.
And there is a proposal to increase the electric car registration fee, but there's a lot of pushback from the automotive manufacturers on that side. But when Craig was mentioning the mileage-based user fee, the state of Oregon here will shortly come online. They'll be the first state to voluntarily allow their citizens to pay based on per mile use.
And I think a lot of us would appreciate something like that, so that those who are making use of the roads, putting wear and tear on the roads, pay for the use of the roads, rather than based on how much fuel you use.
That's right. The fuel tax was originally, as you mentioned, very fair. It was a user fee. The more you drive, when we all paid about this, or you got about the same gas mileage, a mileage-based user fee would mean that the traveling salesman would pay a larger share than the senior citizen who doesn't drive very much, and I think that's a fair way to pay for our road system.
In some of the debate that has happened over the past year or so about increasing the gas tax, there was some suggestions of going and taxing it at the wholesale level as opposed to the retail level at the gas station, you know, when I fill my tank. How would that work, and would that really generate more revenue?
If you want to take that, or
it would generate, the way it's being proposed, it would allow the gas tax to be a percentage of the wholesale price, so it would rise as the price of fuel goes up. Right now, the gas tax is fixed at 19 cents per gallon. Regardless of the price of fuel, it's 19 cents per gallon. At the wholesale level, you know, fuel generally tends to go up over time, so that would slowly, gradually go up. At least we would see some increase with the rate of inflation, or the fuel inflation at any rate.
We've talked about the gas and weight tax being your primary source of funding, and then the federal funds. Are there other sources of funding that you have?
Well, there are other sources. The other main source is a program called the Tri-Party Program.
Okay.
And that is where the Road Commission puts in 1/3 of the project cost. Oakland County government puts in 1/3, and then we ask for 1/3 from the community. Now it's an aggregate of $1 million for each party, therefore the Tri-Party. And then it's divided up based on the accident rate and population and miles of road in the community. And then quite honestly, that's been a real successful program over the years.
Well, I know we've did some road repairs here in Orion Township, and in fact, we've got a project, I think the board here is approved for redoing Axford Road in front of the post office there, which is something that's been very badly needed. So I am a big supporter of the Tri-Party Program. And you also do projects within subdivisions under the Special Assessment District, or an SAD as they call it. How does that work?
Well, how that works is the homeowners are paying for the project improvement, but it's you have to sign a petition, and if you contact us in our subdivision group, we'll help you. But it's a petition. You need 51% of the residents to agree on each street initially, and then we'll set up a special assessment district, and that bill for the residents will go on their taxes, and it's a 10-year payoff to pay for it. So it's graduated. And then we give a guarantee of the work. So the guarantee is actually longer than the payback period.
No, I know in my subdivision, the roads were done about 40 years ago, maybe a little more, and I think generally 30 years is what they consider the useful life of an asphalt road, and so the neighbors have been out circulating petitions, and that's how they would start, but they can work through your subdivision improvement group, and
we through the years have done, I think, over $100 million worth of subdivision work, and we're starting to see a comeback. Obviously, when the economy was down, there weren't too many projects, but they're starting to come back now.
You talk about the revenue that you've gotten and how it has been decreasing. What about expenses?
Well, there's a number of expenses that have gone up. We have a little brochure that we've done, but it really shows anything petroleum related has gone up, by hundreds of percent, if you will. And some people might even say about salt. Why does salt has increased substantially, doubled over the past 10 years or so? Well, that's because the trucking costs. So our expenses have, gone up quite a bit. And while our revenues for a time period from 2001 to 2011 dropped 5.3%. So when
During that same 10-year period, we use a lot of diesel fuel for obviously our big trucks, and the cost of diesel fuel went up almost 400% during that same 10-year period. That our revenues dropped 5.3%, as Dennis mentioned. So that's it's a big disparity between revenues and expenses.
You use a variety of vehicles in your work, from pickup trucks to road graders to chloride trucks. What's the age of your fleet and how new is it?
Well, I don't have the average age of my fleet right with me, but it's significantly old. The last round of new, we call them dump trucks, the winter maintenance trucks, we bought a few in 2006. Now, last year in 2012, we used some savings from the previous winter, which was a little light, if you recall, and we purchased 2 semi-tractors. Now, those are used to pull our tankers for dust control. Had we not been able to buy those 2 new tractors, we would have been struggling to complete our chloride program. And we really look at the chloride program as one of our success stories over the years. We're one of few, if any, road agencies that we drilled our own wells. So we extract the brine out of the ground, and for pennies a gallon, and we're able to pass that savings along to the residents.
And what's the purpose of the brine program or the chloriding program?
Well, it is to put a salt, if you will, on the gravel roads that will hold the moisture in. And if you can hold the moisture in a gravel road and it doesn't dry out, then we're going to suppress the dust. And quite frankly, now we use that same product for winter maintenance. And we call it anti-icing. We will go out and we'll apply the product, not as heavy as we do in the summertime, but we'll apply it before storm and hills, stops, curves, bridge decks, and that gives us some time before the snow or ice will bond. We also use it in winter maintenance. We inject the brine at the spinner and coat the rock salt, and that allows it to stick better on the roadway, and it's also allowed us to reduce our application rate significantly, that we've had a savings at least in the amount of salt we use. So it's been a great product for us.
Joanne, going back to your question about the age of the fleet too, it's kind of a double whammy. I mean, not only are our trucks, most of them significantly older than we would like and therefore breaking down more often, at the same time, because we've had to reduce our staff, we've dropped the number of mechanics we have on staff down to almost a quarter of what it was in 2007.
Wow.
When fully staffed, we had 32 mechanics on staff. Today we have 9 mechanics, maintaining a fleet that's almost as large as it was in 2007, but significantly older than it was then. So our mechanics are going crazy trying to keep an aging fleet on the road, and that's a real challenge, especially in the winter when they're sometimes operating 24 hours a day around the clock in inclement weather.
So just as people know, as their automobile gets a year older and a year older and a year older, well then this starts to go when that starts to go, and now we've got to replace this thing and replace that thing. The same thing is true of all of your trucks and equipment and so on.
That's absolutely right.
And because of the environment they're in with all the salts, and snow plowing is a rough business. Yes, they take a beating and they need a lot of work.
How do you cover the entire county? I mean, you don't all work out of one place, do you?
No, we have 6 locations, 6 district garages across the county. And each one of those garages is staffed, obviously, with personnel and equipment. And as I mentioned, our initial run, we have 106 runs, and that takes care of the higher volume roads. The way we attack winter maintenance is we start with the higher volume roads first and work our way down to subdivision streets.
And that's dictated by safety, obviously. The higher volume roads have higher speeds, more traffic, there's more risk to motorists if they ice up. So.
And when you get money from the state, at least I know when I had the privilege of serving as the manager of the village of Lake Orion, it was based on so much per mile that we had. Is the county funded the same way, so much per mile?
Yes.
There's a formula that
Yeah.
determines how much money each county of the 83 gets. It looks at mileage, but also looks at vehicle registrations, the number of vehicle registrations, which is an indicator of population and traffic. So it's a relatively fair system. I mean, we are a donor to rural counties. We will always be a donor to rural counties because the bulk of the population is here. And we've got to support the rural counties in the state. But it's generally a relatively fair formula.
But on a per mile basis, that's on the mile itself. It's not, you don't get twice as much if the road is a 4-lane road than if it's 2-lane road, do you?
You're absolutely
Right.
Yep.
Correct.
A 2-lane
You're right.
road gets you as much as
Yes.
a 4-lane.
It has more to do with the designation of the road than the lane, the number of
Yes,
lanes.
that's correct.
And so, as you said, Oakland County is a donor county because more revenue is collected here and sent to the state, and we don't get that same amount back. We get a lesser amount back, and you fellas have the headache of making it work.
But as Craig says, we realize we have to, help support the rural counties as well. Some of those, and they've spent, one county I know of in particular this past winter already spent 90% of their budget on winter maintenance.
Wow.
And there are rural counties that have been unable to plow on weekends or salt on weekends because they can't afford it. They just do it on school days only, and nothing they can do on weekends. But that's just a symptom, though, of the larger problem, which is that Michigan, as a state, hasn't adequately funded its road system. I mean, we look at U.S. Census Bureau data, and what you see is that Michigan, compared to the rest of the states in the nation, has been in the bottom 10 states in per capita state and local road funding since 1964. So for 50 years, we've been doing a worse job than most other states in funding our roads on a comparable basis.
Well, when you go 15 years without any increase in revenue, and the state legislature controls that.
Right.
It would be nice if they could control the price of things.
Very true.
And if there was equity between funding and expenses, maybe the task you folks face wouldn't be so onerous.
Very true.
There are other things that the Road Commission gets involved in that people may not be aware of. Recently, we had a storm come through this area and took some limbs down and trees down. You folks are responsible for the road, so if the road's blocked, you got to find somebody to come out and make the road clear again.
That's absolutely right. We have crews that often, in this kind of situation, come in, in the middle of the night and cut up the trees that fall across the road and clear the road so that they're passable. Sometimes we don't even know they've been in overnight. We'll be up in the morning driving down the road and not realize that a couple hours ago a tree was blocking that road, but that is one of our responsibilities.
And another thing, we see the signs, "Don't veer for deer." So when those little deer get hit, as they are wont to do, at least in this part of the county, somebody has to go pick up the carcass, and that's another job that falls to you people.
It certainly is, and quite honestly, that's a pretty expensive job because, years earlier you could, dispose of a deer on some property. Now we have to take those to a dump. So not only the manpower and the equipment time to get the deer, we're also paying a dump fee for it.
And many people don't realize that Oakland County is actually one of the highest counties in the state when it comes to deer car accidents. So we have no shortage of deer along our roads.
I know, because I have traveled, and I think this year alone I have reported at least a half a dozen dead deer. Doesn't mean I was the only person that reported it, but that's quite a lot to do. What major projects here in this area do you have coming up? Anything that has already been approved and is in the works?
Well, we've got the biggest one coming up will be ultimately the widening of Baldwin Road from Morgan to Walton, I believe it is,
Yes.
which is ultimately going to be reconstructed as both a boulevard and a 5-lane road with a number of roundabouts in the midst there. We hope in the next couple of years to start right-of-way acquisition on that project. We're seeking federal funding for that project. It'll be a number of years before we get to the point where that's actually fully constructed, but it's something that's been in the works for quite a while. There's a lot of design work underway. It's a very extensive project, but ultimately I think we'll have a tremendous positive impact on this community.
Well,
Any other projects that maybe not quite that magnitude?
well, we have a couple that are coming in this area. Joslyn Road from Walden to Clarkston. We'll overlay that next year, and that's just a smaller resurfacing. Joslyn, Collier to north of Pacific and Auburn Hills, that's a concrete overlay. And you mentioned Axford, which will happen later this year, but the one I wanted to get in and let people know is Orion Road Bridge by Collins, just south of Collins. We'll be closing that bridge next spring to replace it. The bridge was built in 1922. We're keeping a real close watch on it right now. We understand there's not a very good detour around it, but we will be replacing the bridge because it's in dire need of it.
So anybody that's using Orion Road to get between Lake Orion and Rochester
Yep.
at Collins, right by the cider mill site.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct. Yeah, it was just probably a few years ago, we replaced the bridge at Snell, I believe it is, and now this is its sister bridge.
Well, I thank you very much for coming and visiting with us and presenting this information in the public interest to get people a little better understanding of what the Road Commission does, the challenges it's facing with decreasing revenue and increasing expenses, and the responsibilities that it has. Again, my guests today have been Dennis Kohler, the Managing Director of the Road Commission for Oakland County, and Craig Bryson, Public Information Officer. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. This has been very informative, and appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come and let people know what's going on with their roads.
Well, thank you, Joanne. It's been our pleasure.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, and again, appreciate you people turning in to this program of information in the public interest, and we look forward to presenting more information of this type in the future. And for now, have a great day.